Welcome to the second Aftra podcast. It now has a name. It's called Hack and Tell. I'd like to welcome Pavel Chen. He's a security engineer at Syndis. And let's just get right into it. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you for having me here. Hack and Tell, by the way, is a really cool name.
Okay.
So a bit about me. I'm a security engineer at a company called Syndis. And that's been for 3.5 years approximately. So I'm relatively new to this industry. Prior to that, for about 13 years, I've been a software developer and mostly in web development. I worked a lot on both front end, back end, full stack engineer, basically what they call it these days.
So how did you get into security? What's your journey into that?
Yeah, so it was a bit spontaneous. It was through an acquisition of a company. I was a engineer in the cloud solutions of Orri in 2021, and then Syndis was acquired. So my first pen test was around the end of 2021, which was also kind of spontaneous. I think they were short on resources, and I was just asked to try to do a pen test, and okay. I went for it.
So I know that you are on the sort of application security end of the spectrum. Can you maybe talk us through like what kind of cybersecurity you're working on? What's your sort of day-to-day things of that nature?
Right. So I'm in the offensive security team, and my day-to-day job is application security, application assessments. That means for white box assessments where customers come and give us source code, tell how the system works, what's the environment, what's the architecture, basically assess as much as we can within a given time frame. There is also black box assessment. That's when we don't normally get any access to the system. We don't have any information about it. We just are given with some URLs, sometimes API endpoints. We just spend our time finding vulnerabilities.
Okay.
And the focus is normally the OWASP top 10, but we don't just stick to OWASP top 10. We go sometimes a mile further.
So this whole idea about white box application assessments, meaning that the customer is providing access to the source code. I mean, what's the benefit? What are the pros and cons of doing that versus not providing the source code?
Right. So the pros are definitely that the assessments are more thorough, and things that would be missed in a black box assessment are spotted right away. So low-hanging fruits.
So from the point of view of the customer, they're definitely like putting quite a lot of trust into you as a service provider, as a nice hacker or a pen tester by doing that, right?
Yes.
But from a paradigm point of view, you know, hackers, the bad ones, meaning or malicious hackers, they would they have access to the source code? Do they actually have sometimes access to the source code?
Well, sometimes they do have access to the source code, and the source code can be acquired maybe through some other type of attack where network is infiltrated and some repo is leaked. Then they have the source code and can analyze an application. Sometimes systems are just open source and you can find the source code online.
Okay, but application security, so you talked a little bit about this, but for application security, it can be web applications, it can be, I'm assuming, mobile applications, it can be, you know, the old style desktop applications as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, so the theme that we wanted to go into a little bit today was API security. Can you talk a bit about the sort of difference between just application security as a general concept versus then API security? What are the differences?
So if we refer to OWASP top 10, there is a general OWASP top 10, and there is a OWASP top 10 for the API specifically, and there is a huge overlap. In my experience, it doesn't really matter to which risk terminology or risk framework you're looking at. Those are all vulnerability types. All the applications, or almost all the applications today, whether mobile or web, they have some kind of API either in the backend or maybe the client-side code of the front end calls some APIs. So in majority of the projects, we see APIs for sure, and it's kind of difficult today to find a project, either white box or black box, where API wouldn't be part of the assessment. In terms of differences, classic web applications, they are sometimes vulnerable to cross-site scripting or server-side template injections, which are normally not affecting APIs. But other than that, access control, authorization, authentication issues, injections, and so on, they can be present in both. So, like I said, there's a
huge overlap basically.
Yeah.
But I mean, many companies are even just run as an API business. They're selling access to some sort of a data set, or they're used for important actions. So many companies separate their public API from their internal API, and quite a lot of times they expose it for consumption to enrich user behavior or something like that. Should companies think about the difference between the public and the internal API?
I think companies should treat all the APIs equally. So if we talk about public API, it's an API just without authentication, but it's probably belonging to a same ecosystem. And users who would be accessing the API, users, clients, doesn't matter, they would probably just be making some unauthenticated calls. But it doesn't mean that input into the system is in nature much different from what they would be getting from within their firewall network, internal network.
But sometimes these kind of public APIs, they're built for a different purpose. So imagine just an application like Aftra. We have a public API that can be leveraged through something like a very general token. So sometimes they're being used in a different context. It's being used like a machine is calling it. It may have more permissions than just the regular API. Mm-hmm. Things of that nature. Is that just a fallacy on my end to think about it differently?
I think it's just a question of the role separation. Generally, security practices, and I believe, I think
API is an API.
API is an API. Yeah.
I mean that's fair. It's just we get a lot of these questions when we're selling Aftra, if we have an API scanner, a specific one. So we're an external attack surface management solution. So we collect information about all of the digital assets of the company, all the ones that we can find at least, and then we scan it in various ways. So we have the vulnerability scanner, which is checking what system is running. Then we ask if there are publicly known vulnerabilities, and then we have web application security scanning facilities. So we are trying the things that you mentioned, like XSS and template forgery and things of that nature. But then kind of just how we also find APIs, whether they're public or not, enumerate them, and then how we scan them seems to be very important to our customers. And we have built features into Aftra which are very specific API scanning capabilities. Mm-hmm. But the results of those scans are not exactly so different from the web application security scanning results, if you get my meaning.
Yeah.
So what I'm really saying is like the community or the people or our potential customers, they view it very differently. And what I'm trying to kind of ascertain is, whether they should, or if it's just, it's all the same. They're just vulnerabilities. They're just digital assets that need to be scanned or need to be tested.
Yeah, I think it's more of a question of how they do this internally. But for me as a security engineer, yes, these are all vulnerabilities. When we take a project and the API is a part of it, doesn't matter if it's a client side talking to it or backend talking to it. We would like to see it as a part of the whole application ecosystem, not kind of treat it separately. Oh, like this is an API, because many attacks are chained. So maybe you have a vulnerability in your API. Let's say the severity level is low, but you could maybe with a certain technique elevate it to medium, high, and so on. So vulnerability basically becomes leading to like account takeover. In the security assessments, especially black box, what's sometimes interesting for me, the job is easy and you just try to find vulnerabilities in that defined set of endpoints.
Actually, I think that's really interesting. So again, from kind of like the context of Aftra, what we're trying to find is what we call digital footprints. So it's any kind of like information that we can find about the company. So documentation and just any information on the website or something like that becomes a potentially important piece of information. So, API documentation is for the convenience of a programmer programming against our system, right? But it's also possibly interesting for you as a hacker, as a pen tester, because it tells you about just like the functionality of the system. And if you find something like change admin password or something in the API, that becomes kind of interesting, right?
Exactly.
Okay, do you have any like examples when you have been able to use this kind of like information, either in pen tests or competitions or something like that?
Yeah, in one example from a few months ago, we were assessing. It was a black box engagement. There was a bunch of servers, and one server was it's a monitoring server, nothing in particular, username and password. Username and password based authentication, so we can't really get into it. We started fuzzing it.
Fuzzing. Tell us about fuzzing.
Fuzzing. So let's say you have a URL and you want to see if there are any directories under that URL or any files under that URL which are not known. Maybe they're indexed by Google, but like you have as a user, you have no idea about them.
Yeah.
So sometimes like there is a test.php file or test.aspx. After fuzzing for directories, apparently there is a secondary application, not a monitoring application, secondary application, that is an API. And it also has a API definition. And it also is unauthenticated. So that's the juiciest finding. So now we can just go and try different endpoints. So one of the endpoints was returning a list of users with the password unencrypted. And that's as bad as it can get, right? So talking about this task of like identifying endpoints. So not only the Swagger definition that is given to you as a pen tester or a hacker finds somewhere online, but also like techniques like fuzzing, they help you identify those types of assets indirectly.
I actually have a similar story about this. I may have already told you this, but I think it's interesting. So I remember there was a company that got hacked here in Iceland, and I was really excited about it because I wanted to like understand if our solution would be able to sort of like find the vulnerability that we thought had been used. And so I started sort of poking around. And what I was mainly interested in was like if we could find out who works there and in what role they are at the company. Do you remember this?
Yes.
Okay, and then it kind of like you say, it's a chained kind of thing. So first, yes, the website has like a directory listing of all the employees and what they do and all sorts of information, and the information also pointed to an API.
Mm-hmm.
So we open the API, and I should give credit to Kristin for finding this. Kristin, for a shout out. But so yeah, I was pointing to the server, and the login page had like a weird logo, and the logo had a very specific name of the application and also the version number. So by Googling that, or not necessarily Googling, just searching, the first result was the code repository for that application, and the first message in the the documentation was, "This is deprecated. We will not be shipping any security fixes for it ever again." So they were running something that was very publicly not patched, not secure,
Yes.
and then they had amazingly detailed documentation for the API, and the API for the the users in the system had the ability to change the password, issue a new like two-factor token.
Right.
So even if the application itself had user, password, and a multi-factor authentication, the API was capable of breaking it, right? So yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, that was really interesting. So API security might be a little bit interesting.
Yes. Another example of how hackers might identify API endpoints which are not known. Let's say there is no Swagger documentation, there is nothing. Is through JavaScript files, and that's very interesting. So, like one of the first steps when I find when I have a target web app, I look through JavaScript files, even the minified ones, because sometimes they reveal just everything in terms of like what API endpoints present. How many developers separate, okay, this JavaScript file should be only for admins, another JavaScript file should be only for like managers, and the third one should be like just for regular users. Not many. It normally is bundled as a single minified JavaScript file, and everything is there. And the bonus sometimes also like hard-coded authentication token. But even without that, sometimes you see endpoints which look interesting, like act on behalf of someone, and that also like I see quite a lot.
So I don't know how many will listen to this, but I hear all the time from the Syndis or the Aftra conferences that people sort of coming out from the community, they feel a bit sort of like not at ease after having conversation about hacking. They don't maybe completely understand the the concepts and stuff like that. But okay, I want to segue into, so you had been a software developer for 13 years, and then you have 3 years,
3.5 years
cybersecurity, experience. So okay, firstly, do programmers think way differently than security engineers?
Yes, I believe so.
And did you benefit from having been a developer transitioning over to an engineer, a security engineer?
I think it benefited a lot of having like this 13 years experience of being just a web developer without any like security training. Although I had been in projects where our software was assessed, and that kind of helped not to repeat the same mistakes. But yeah, absolutely, that helped. So like coming from the other side of the tunnel, I kind of know, maybe not 100%, but I know like how developers think.
Yeah, you've taken all the shortcuts. You know where the secrets are buried.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because, like you say, in these JavaScript files where you're doing pen tests, you can find things that are of high value to you, but the person writing it or creating the software isn't really thinking about security, because their motivation is to get value out to the customer quickly, right?
Yeah, maybe security is not always like the main priority.
What is the relationship then between a security engineer and a software developer? Like if they are trying to create something cool for a customer or for an application, and then you come and you break it. Are these exchanges friendly? Are they sometimes maybe not?
So when I was in web development on day-to-day basis, when vulnerabilities were identified in our projects, we were not like blaming or being mad at the security engineers. No, we would normally just take it and fix it and kind of hope that the impact wasn't that bad, that vulnerability wasn't known prior to them identifying it. And now I'm a security engineer, and when we report findings, I personally have never had a negative response towards our findings.
Maybe it's just a personal thing. I used to be a developer at one point, and sometimes the quality assurance people weren't my favorite when they found mistakes I had made. But I mean, I totally get it. I think everybody's at least trying to be sort of on the same team just to make things a little bit better. Especially kind of like how security has evolved as a topic in the last recent years. Back to kind of like APIs a little bit, shadow APIs. So we kind of alluded to that, meaning that they are APIs that are like not maybe exposed, publicly documented, but sometimes there are shadow APIs.
Yes.
That even the company doesn't know about, something that's being called behind the scenes. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that would fall into this category like of the finding which I told you about, where a server was fuzzed and an API was identified. And I don't know if the customer did it by mistake or was it intentional. Yesterday, I was listening to a podcast. Some like well-known white hat ethical hackers, they were able to chain a vulnerability to like account takeover, and that was due to downgrade from like version 5 to version 2, which means that like shadow APIs sometimes not only the ones that are undocumented or are out there and nobody knows about them. I think like all the versions of APIs, they can also be treated as shadow APIs. Possibly companies sometimes overlook security aspects like of all the versions of the APIs and don't apply security patches because maybe the API is used like by 1 or 2 customers, remaining customers, and who don't transition over.
Yeah, exactly. But it's some older version of the application. It's still present only for the 1 or 2 customers that haven't moved over, but it's still exposed. It's still kind of technically usable. Yeah. I think that's actually quite interesting. What about just like API interactions that are maybe either unattended or unwanted even? You built an application, you have connected it to something, and that something is making API requests to something you don't know, maybe even leaking information about your application. Have you ever seen anything like that?
I've seen cases of, it's called server-side request forgery. That's when your API is making requests to another API, not necessarily leaking the info, but maybe retrieving the info and displaying to you. That would possibly fall into what you are asking.
A few years ago, many people were really scared whether or not the routers that were being supplied by the IT companies were possibly like phoning home some information, like sending information to, I don't know, to a secret organization about our network traffic or something like that. As far as I can tell, it wasn't substantiated, but there was definitely some fear around this.
Well, it's good that people have concern about it, definitely.
In terms of just application security, maybe specifically towards APIs, do you think there's a lot of snake oil out there?
Yeah, I think there are cases like that, and systems which just do automated fuzzing, automated scanning, which are kind of basic, which developers or security engineers could do on their own, like within short time frame. Sometimes that is being solved like as a sophisticated security solution. We are using like AI, and AI does a very small part in it, or offload it entirely to some huge model vendor.
So where does an application like Aftra, which you are familiar with, fit into sort of like the scope? So framing it a little bit more, you have solutions like ours, which is doing quite a lot of autonomous or automatic things. Then you have the pen tests, you have the bug bounties, you have the defensive systems, you have the security management consulting, and you have the compliance. So my question is kind of like, if we go back a little bit to the API and application security and Aftra, like where's a good fit? Are we a useful addition into the mix?
Yeah, definitely. And I think customers who are using solutions such as Aftra, they would benefit like instantly right away, because it's attack surface mapping, especially for the companies who just start their security journey. I think that's one of the best ways to enter. Once you get that feeling of what your external surface is, what assets there are, what API endpoints there are, then you can take further steps and hire a pen testing company or create your own security engineer team. I'm pretty sure like that's one of the first steps that companies should take, onboarding solutions like that.
Okay, so you heard it here first. Pavel says you should all buy Aftra. It's your first step towards being more secure, right?
Yes.
Or continuing down that line. So as a customer buying a pen test, what in my experience, those customers, the buyer of that service, is usually not a very informed buyer. They don't really know where they stand when they buy the pen test. Quite a lot of times it's about kind of like they need to do the pen test because of some framework or because of a big contract. Of course, there are exclusions on it. You have companies that are very mature in their security journey here in Iceland and elsewhere, but then they go through the pen test. So they're an uninformed buyer. A lot of times they get a pen test, which is usually a PDF report with security notes in it, and they don't really have any place to put it. It's just like, I bought a pen test, here's a list of things, I hand it over to some person that has to put it into a system. So I think one aspect where we can work together is that the results of the pen test in conjunction with the information in Aftra can be quite valuable to customers. Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I think it's valid. I think it makes sense to have reports from pen tests connected to their external or internal, doesn't matter, their inventory, basically.
Yes, to their kind of grand overview. So what is the difference between, so we provide this information, but we also do kind of like this scanning of various types. What is the difference between just in general automatic vulnerability detection tooling and then a pen test?
In short, pen tests would cover edge cases, something like examples of chained attacks, where something leads to account takeover. Vulnerability scanner, it would find some known vulnerabilities. It would help me to identify where vulnerabilities possibly can be. So let's say I ran a scan or a scan has been running for some time, and then it identified, okay, there is like a outdated Apache server. All right, that's interesting. Maybe there is also like an outdated application on that outdated Apache server. So I would go and pursue interesting things in that, like a kind of low-hanging fruit that gave me that was given to me by the vulnerability scanner.
So summarizing a little bit, so a vulnerability scanner, whichever type or product it is, might result possibly in 3 distinct vulnerabilities, but it requires context and possibly experience and maybe some skill even to correlate these 3, contextualize them and possibly create like you said, a chain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the follow-up question is how does or how will or how has AI already sort of stepped into that area? Because like these LLMs, they're usually quite good at context. Are they at this point, or will they be useful in pen testing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they will be useful. They are already useful. There are certain groups, like on bug bounty programs. Group of people, not like single ethical hackers, but a group of people who are successfully employing AI and finding 0 days, and that's pretty amazing.
0 days meaning
Vulnerabilities that have been discovered and there is no patch for it yet.
okay, so they're not publicly known. So you're not
Yeah.
looking up some database. You're actually finding,
Yes.
creating or not creating, implementing the vulnerability, finding the weakness.
Identifying vulnerability. Yes.
So yeah, I think that's really interesting. So maybe a little bit about like bug bounties. How is that different from the pen tests?
Mm-hmm.
Have you been a part of that at all?
Yeah, I'm registered on a number of bug bounty platforms, and in my spare time, when I have a mood, time, and space to focus, I go for it. And approach is normally similar to what I've described before about fuzzing and looking through JavaScript files. My targets are normally web applications, and that's how I go about it. Basically, analyze what is available to me and look for weaknesses.
So prior to Defend Iceland as a bug bounty in Iceland, I don't think many Icelandic companies were even a part of a bug bounty. Do you think it has been a positive impact on the security market?
I was in bug bounty programs where Icelandic companies were hiring like foreign bug bounty platforms and their security engineers, and the security engineers, with all due respect, they were not understanding what Icelandic market, what Icelandic software, how things work here. They were not understanding that at all. So asking questions like how would you get an SSN of a person to exploit an issue? So things like this that make localized bug bounty kind of valuable.
Okay. One more topic. We discussed this prior. You were hesitant, but I know you have been working on a few legacy systems. So let's see what we can do. So I know you worked to some degree on software for ATMs. So ATM stands for a time machine, right? No, it's a
automated teller machine.
Same thing.
Yes.
So yeah, you worked on software in ATMs?
Yes, I did.
So can you talk about security for ATMs in ATMs to any kind of degree?
Well, I can tell that there is obviously physical security. Don't know specifics. There is network security. Normally there are firewalls. ATMs being on a private network, they don't have like a public. They're not publicly accessible from the internet. And there is of course, encryption of various kinds happening. So, for example, a device where you enter your PIN
It's
called EPP, which is standing for encrypting pin pad. So whenever you are entering a pin on a ATM, the pin is encrypted, and that is used for like consecutive operations.
Okay.
And then that encryption key is used like for API calls and so on. And without it, you can't really like do any transaction. Regarding encryption, there is of course SSL certificate usage. Maybe sometimes there is a like just server certificate being trusted. In other cases, you need both client certificate plus the server certificate.
So it's sounding very, very complicated. So, okay, if I, from my very limited understanding, as a previous programmer and now something else, you have an ATM. Inside that box is a computer that's running Windows, I'm assuming. Probably a really old version, because that's just how the banking industry works. So if I could somehow connect to it, I'm assuming I could, if I was a hacker, I could somehow break into the computer and dispense money. Is that correct?
No.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. So there is like, let's say theoretically you got into some computer and you got onto OS level, you are logged in. There is no like script or a function that is called like dispense money, decimal amount, that you can just tell like control the ATM in that way. It's a bit more complicated than that.
So I hope we don't come under any kind of suspicion, because there was an ATM that was, I mean, it was just physically stolen, right? Just a few days ago. So
yeah,
they won't be hacking into it.
I don't know. Maybe they're using AI.
Or maybe they just have physical devices, like, to just break into it, I guess.
Don't know.
That's probably easier. Meaning it's probably easier than what you're describing.
Yeah.
Actually, it kind of surprises me, to be completely honest.
That somebody would steal an ATM.
Well, yes, that surprises me. but I mean, I don't know. I just, when you think about legacy systems being just, an older generation of technology and computers, automatically I just assume that it doesn't have sufficient, security around it, even if they are, business critical, like ATMs or things of that nature. Which category do you find the most fun to work with, like to pen test, I mean?
Do you mean the industries? Or
yeah, like, do you like trying to pen test something that you know is going to be a really big challenge? Do you like to pen test the ones that are easy?
Easy and critical, that's like ideal world. I like to find like critical vulnerabilities. Sometimes there are like low hanging fruits. They end up in like being critical issues, and that's, I feel like I'm feeling lucky. Sometimes I spend like maybe 10-20 hours on a single vulnerability, and it ends up being like low or medium. And sometimes I feel like maybe it's a time waste, but no, it helps you learn. And even though it's like a low and medium, it's still impactful. Maybe by fixing a low or medium, the company kind of mitigated against other attacks that could have been chained to vulnerability.
Yeah, okay, that's very interesting. Do you have any meaningful general advice for companies or people thinking about API security?
In short, KISS principle. KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. So API security is not a new thing. Like authentication, it's a solved problem. Don't reinvent the wheel, don't create your own mechanism of parsing, verifying JWT tokens or something that has been there for years. Just make it simple, maintainable, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, I think that's sound advice. So we don't have time for more, but I'd like to wholeheartedly thank you for having the conversation. I want to thank those that are watching or listening, and I would like to remind you that we have a previous podcast with Niels from Ampa, and I invite you all to check that out as well, and hoping for a few more episodes down the line.
Thank you.